Chapter 1: The Practice of Mindfulness. 1. The Little Book. I entered the Zen Monastery in the imperial city of Hui when I was 16 years old. After a brief adjustment to the monastic life, I presented myself before the monk responsible for my training and asked him to teach me the Zen way. He gave me a small book, the Little Manual of Practice, printed in Chinese characters, and asked me to learn it by heart. I thanked him and went to my room to study. The book, which is famous in Zen circles, is divided into 3 parts. 1. Practice in everyday life. 2. Essential practices for a novice. And 3. The teachings of Zen Master Thich Nhat Hanh. There is no philosophy at all in the book. All 3 parts discuss only practical problems. The first part teaches how to calm and concentrate the mind. The second discusses the precepts and other practices essential to monastic life. The third is a beautiful exhortation to Zen students to encourage them to remember that their time in life are precious and should not be vainly dissipated. I was assured that not only young novices begin with this book, but that monks even 40 and 50 also followed its prescriptions. Before entering the monastery, I had already received some Western education, and I had the impression that the methods of teaching Buddhism in the monasteries were a little old-fashioned. First, we were asked to learn the whole book by heart. Then, we will begin practicing without even being given the theoretical principles underlying it. I shared this concern with another novice who told me, "This is the way followed here. If you want to learn Zen, you must accept it." So I resigned myself to beginning my practice in the traditional way. The first part of the Little Manual, Practice in Everyday Life, contains gathas, short verses that bring the energy of mindfulness to each act of daily life. For example, when I wash my hands, I bring forth this thought: water flows over these hands. May I use them skillfully to preserve our precious planet. When I am sitting in the meditation hall, I think sitting here is like sitting under the Bodhi tree. My body is mindfulness itself, entirely free from distraction. And even when using the toilet, I say to myself, defiled or immaculate, increasing or decreasing, these concepts exist only in our mind. The reality of interbeing is unsurpassed. Practice in everyday life contains a total of 50 gathas. We have to practice intelligently so that we can compose others when we need them. The ones in the manual are only examples. We should modify or even change them and write others more suited to our need and contemporary conditions. Suppose I am about to use a telephone. There is no gatha for using the telephone in the Little Manual, because at that time the book was written, there were no telephones. I have invented a number of gathas, like the following: words can travel thousands of miles. May my words create mutual understanding and love. May they be beautiful as gems, as lovely as flowers. I have compiled a book of traditional and modern gathas entitled Present Moment, Wonderful Moment, Mindfulness Verses for Daily Living for your use in the practice. When I was 16, I thought the little manual was written for young people and those who were just beginning the practice of Zen. I thought this method was just for preparation. But today, more than 50 years later, I know that the little manual is the very essence of Zen Buddhism. Necessary awareness. I remember a short conversation between the Buddha and the philosopher of his time. I have heard that Buddhism is a doctrine of enlightenment. What is your method? What do you practice every day? We walk, we eat, we wash ourselves, we sit down. What is so special about that? Everyone walks, eats, washes, sits down. So, when we walk, we are aware that we are walking. When we eat, we are aware that we are eating. When others walk, eat, wash, or sit down, they are generally not aware of what they are doing. In Buddhism, mindfulness is the key. Mindfulness is the energy that sets light on all things and all activities, producing the power of concentration, bringing forth deep insight and awakening. Mindfulness is at the base of all Buddhist practice. To set light on all things? This is the point of departure. If I live without mindfulness, in forgetfulness, I am, as Albert Camus says in his novel, The Stranger, living like a dead person. The ancient Zen masters used to say, if we live in forgetfulness, we died in a dream. How many among us live like a dead person? The first thing we have to do is to return to life, to wake up and to be mindful of each thing we do. Are we aware when we are eating, drinking, sitting, and meditation? Or are we wasting our time living in forgetfulness? To produce the power of concentration, mindfulness helps us focus our attention on and know what we are doing. Usually, we are the prisoner of society. Our energies are dispersed here and there. Our body and our mind are not in harmony. To begin to be aware of what we are doing, saying, and thinking is to begin to resist in invasion by our surroundings and by all of our wrong perceptions. When the lamp of awareness is lit, our whole being lights up, and each passing thought and emotion is also lit up. Self-confidence is re-established. The shadows of illusion is no longer overwhelm us, and our concentration develops to its fullest. We wash our hands, dress, perform everyday actions as before, but now we are aware of our actions, words, and thoughts. The practice of mindfulness is not only the novice, it is a lifelong practice for everyone, even the Buddha himself. The power of mindfulness and concentration is the spiritual force behind all of the great men and women of human history. To bring forth deep insight and awakening, the arm of Zen Buddhism is a clear vision of reality, seeing things as they are, and that is acquired by the power of concentration. This clear vision is enlightenment. Enlightenment is always enlightenment about something, not an abstract. Mindfulness. This process to set light on all things, to produce the power of concentration, and to bring forth deep insight and awakening is called in Buddhism the threefold training: sila, precepts; samadhi, concentration; and prajna, insight. The word sila also means mindfulness because the essence of the precept is mindfulness. Precepts in Buddhism are not imposed by some outside authority. They arise from our own insight based on the practice of mindfulness. To be attached to the form without understanding the essence is to fall into what Buddhism calls attachment to rules. We realize insight by practicing mindfulness of our body, feelings, mind, and the objects of our mind, which are the world. That is why the first part of the little manual consists of mindfulness verses to memorize and is called Practice in Everyday Life. When the scientist works in her laboratory, she doesn't smoke, eat sweet, or listen to the radio. The scientist refrains from doing these things not because they are immoral, but because she knows that they impede perfect concentration on the object of her study. It is the same in Zen. The precepts help us live in mindfulness. In Zen, insight cannot be obtained by just intellect, study, hypothesis, analysis, synthesis. The Zen student must use his or her entire being as an instrument of realization. The intellect is only one part of our being, and a part that often pulls us away from living reality, which is very substance of Zen. That is why the little manual doesn't represent Buddhism as a theory. It introduces the practitioners directly into the daily practice of Zen. In the monastery, the practitioner does everything in mindfulness, carries water, looks for firewood, prepares food, plant lettuce. Although we learn to meditate in sitting position, we also learn the mindful while carrying water, cooking, or planting lettuce. We know that to carry water is not merely a utilitarian action. It is the very essence of Zen. If we do not practice while carrying water, it is waste of time to seclude ourselves in a monastery. But if we are mindful of each thing we do, even if we do the exact things as others, we can enter directly into the world of Zen. A Zen master observes the student in silence, while the student tries to bring the practice into every moment of life. The student may feel that he is not receiving enough attention, but his ways and acts cannot escape the observation of the master. The master can see if the student is or is not awake. If, for example, the student shuts the door noisily or carelessly, he is demonstrating a lack of mindfulness. Closing the door gently is not in itself a virtuous art, but awareness of the fact that you are closing the door is an expression of real practice. In this case, the master simply reminds the student to close the door attentively, to be mindful. The master does this not only to respect the quiet of the monastery, but to point out to the student that he was not practicing mindfulness, that his act was not majestic or subtle. It is said in Buddhism that there are 90,000 subtle gestures to practice. These gestures and acts are expressions of the presence of mindfulness. All that we say, think, and do in mindfulness are described as having the flavor of Zen. If a practitioner hears himself reproached for lacking the flavor of Zen in what he says and does, he should recognize that he is being reminded to live his life in mindfulness.